Hi, everyone on YouTube. We're here at the onset of the Bay Area 100 Coaching Collab. This is our first session, and we're going to be on live tonight with Mallory Servais. She is a social change educator. Today is like bring your social educator to work day. Mal's got a great presentation on mindfulness. So with no further ado, Hi, Mal. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So why don't you just kick off? You share your genius with us.
Awesome, great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen, and for now, we'll just focus on sharing what there is to share about how to run your mind. Focus tonight is on mindfulness, mental endurance, and running performance, especially as it pertains to achieving your goals at the Bay Area 100. I'm really excited to share tonight. Wanted to start by just giving a little overview of who's hosting you tonight, who I am and my coaching. I am an education professional. My focus currently with high schoolers is primarily on social change and social action campaigns with young people. But I am also a certified mindfulness instructor, and I've taught mindfulness to 5-year-olds and 55-year-olds, the whole range. So really excited to share that specialty tonight. I have also been running for over 20 years and almost 15 of those in trail and ultra. I am a Bay Area local and I'm based in Berkeley. So really excited because I've been on pretty much all the trails that have been featured in the Bay Area 100, and really excited that you guys all get to see those. I'm also a certified running and ultra running coach. My athletes are beginners to very experienced athletes running everything from the 5K to 100 miles and beyond. I work with road and trail athletes, and everything in between. I'm also the head coach for cross country and track and field at Oakland Tech, our local high school. So go Bulldogs. And I dabble in a lot of the local running groups, friend to all and loyal to none. And you can find me at mindrunnercoaching.com or Service with a Smile, Mindrunner Coaching on Instagram if that's your preference. But again, I'm really excited here to combine my passion for sharing mindfulness and the skills that you can gain from mindfulness and ultra running. But you may be asking yourself, what does mindfulness have to do with running 100 miles? How do those two go together? So to kick us off, I want to ask you to imagine a scenario, right? Imagine two runners at the start line of an ultra, maybe the Bay Area 100, for example. These two athletes have the same training volume, the same fitness, the same fueling plan, or at least a fueling plan that works for them, and the same experience. Consider all variables accounted for and equalized. And by mile 70, both of these athletes are hurting. It is dark, their legs are cooked, maybe it's getting a little cold out there, and the finish feels pretty far away. Now imagine one of those runners starts negotiating, slowing down, shrinking their goal, trying to escape the discomfort in any way they know how, whether that's sitting for a really long time at the aid station or kind of, rationalizing with their pacer. But the other is hurting just as much. The other runner is also struggling, but they have a different relationship to what they're feeling. They know how to stay present. They know how to redirect their attention, and they know how to choose purpose over pain. Physically, they're equal, but what separates them is their mental endurance. And we spend countless hours as athletes training for our bodies, right? We practice the mileage, we fuel, we work on our strength training, we really dial in our gear. But we rarely spend as much time on the part of us that actually decides the outcome as we move through the hardest mile. And so I really picked this topic for tonight because mental endurance can be taken at face value in the ultra community, and beyond too. I feel like, people just assume you just have mental endurance because you're crazy enough to sign up for a 100-miler. But the truth is that cultivating mindset and mental endurance takes work. It takes training, the same way that strength training does, the same way that hill repeats or nutrition do. And so tonight is about training the mind. A few key definitions before we go too deep into what we know about mindfulness and ultra running. And so the first one is mindfulness, which is intentional, present moment awareness without judgment. And if that sounds simple, it's because it is. But just because it's simple doesn't necessarily mean that it's super easy. Mindfulness basically strengthens the connection between the mind and body through things like conscious breathing, awareness of the present moment, observation, and stillness. It activates the part of the brain that's linked to attention and emotional regulation, the prefrontal cortex, essentially, which is why mindfulness is so fun to practice with teenagers because they have so little of that. But when it comes to mindfulness, you can focus on mindfulness of thoughts, mindfulness of emotions, mindfulness of body sensations, sound. These are all practices that can help cultivate mindfulness. And unfortunately, because this is only a half an hour, we can't go do a deep dive on each of these practices, but we will be talking about some of them later on in the presentation. I want to make a quick kind of distinction here between mindfulness and meditation, because meditation is it's a spiritual practice that a lot of religious traditions use, and mindfulness is what I look at as sort of the secular practice that is used in mindfulness in meditation. And so essentially, when I think of mindfulness, we're looking at the scientific study of the practices that help to build that part of your brain. So a quick distinction there. And then mental endurance is the ability to stay focused, resilient, and engaged through prolonged discomfort. And I love that phrase, prolonged discomfort, because that's basically a tagline for ultra running, right? Like practicing prolonged discomfort. And so when we talk about these two definitions in conjunction, we're looking at how mindfulness as a practice can be used for building mental endurance. So mindfulness is the skill set, and by increasing our awareness of the present moment, we can improve our mental endurance. And why this matters for runners is because endurance performance is driven not just by your physical capacity, but also by your ability to manage attention, manage your emotions, and manage your perceived exertion. And so when I think of it, I actually look at running as a mental sport with a physical component. And one thing I'll say is that science is increasing around these topics. So mindfulness as a stress reducing practice has been studied now for probably about 30 decades more cohesively. And we also have a lot of psychological studies that we can draw from, and more recently, a lot more scientific studies around exertion, sport, psychology, and mindfulness. And so we're drawing from a lot of these different scientific studies, but also a lot of these just back up what we kind of already intuitively know from our experience ultra running, which is that these two things, endurance sports and mindfulness and mindset, actually go together really strongly. One of the first things I want to talk about is how mental endurance predicts physical endurance. And so athletes generally with higher mental toughness persist significantly longer in fatigue tasks. And another thing that we do know is that perceived effort is one of the true limiters in endurance sports. As humans, we are evolved to see pain as an indicator of danger, death, things like that. And so we are basically sending persistent messages that when we feel fatigue, we should try and stop at all costs. But these messages evolved to protect us, but we can override them. And perceived effort is one of those indicators of stopping performance. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. Another piece here that we do know about mindset and endurance is that mindfulness reduces performance limiting stress. So before a race or before a competition, mindfulness training can reduce pre-competition anxiety by up to 30%, which is a huge amount, right? Especially when we talk about gear, right? They talk about 3% in your carbon plated shoes, right? Improved performance. But when you look at it, if mindfulness can reduce pre-race stress by 30%, that's huge. So something to think about there. Mindfulness can also improve pacing. So we know that there is better split pacing and smarter pacing among athletes who have cultivated greater awareness and mindfulness practices. Building mental toughness also increases pain tolerance, which is a really cool fact because we know that breath focus and acceptance practices actually increase pain tolerance 20 to 25%. And so that's another really big piece there too. Visualization. So visualization practices, visualizing success, visualizing finishing the race, boosts time to exhaustion. So mental imagery can increase your endurance output 10 to 15%. These are all really huge, basically backing up how important mindset is when it comes to endurance sports. Mindfulness can also improve in-race decision-making. So for those of you who have run long endurance events before and found yourself in an aid station and then walked out and realized that you forgot half of the things that you thought you wanted, if you've ever, been like me and found yourself in that position, you realize that having your wits about you, so being mindful and being intentional as you walk into an aid station, for example, can really improve your decision-making skills. So cultivating that present moment awareness is key in all facets of endurance sport. And one of the last things I want to share is that we do know that elites use mental strategies consistently. So some of the top people in endurance sports are using some of the strategies that help to cultivate present moment awareness. So 80% of top marathoners and ultra runners report regular mental skills practice. Also, elite ultra runner Addie Bracey recently wrote a book about mental endurance practices for athletes. A lot of podcasts now talking about how important the mental resilience factors are in ultra training and ultra endurance sports. I know that Trail Society just released an episode on resilience and mental toughness, and heard multiple top athletes recently reporting that they've been using visualization strategies to help increase their mental endurance during sport. So what we see in that case is that mindfulness improves mental endurance, and mental endurance improves performance in endurance events, like our ultras. And mental endurance is a skill that can be trained and practiced and improved the same way that you can with physical training. And this is good news for us, right? Because everything that we are able to practice is something that we can control for a little bit better on race day. The reality is that if we're ignoring the mental piece, we're missing a huge potential for improvement in our performance. But what does that mean for practical application and takeaways? I want to talk through different pieces of where you can implement both training and implementation of mental endurance practices. So when we're talking about during training, practice makes perfect. One thing that I would love for people to focus on is a mindfulness skill called body awareness. Body awareness is where you focus on what your body is experiencing in the present moment. Again, very simple. But one reason we want to do this during training is because we want to learn our body's cues now so that when we are in a race situation, we are prepared to do what we need to do to take care of that bodily sensation. So learning your body's cues like hunger, thirst, panic, and distress, and actually paying attention to those during training can really help you during race day. And one thing I want to talk about here is that other piece about mindfulness, which is non-judgment. So when we have a day where we experience distress during a workout, instead of catastrophizing and being like, that was the worst workout ever, whatever, neutralizing it and just saying, during that run, I experienced a lot of hunger. I should have brought more food with me. Keeping it as simple as that. The next piece I want to talk about is practicing what you're going to say to yourself during the race, during training. Think about that example I gave at the very beginning of this training where we were talking about the two different runners. If you're the type of runner who gets to the end of a workout and you say, man, that was the worst workout ever. I did so terrible. Like, I can't believe that I'm even going to try this 100-miler. That's how you're going to talk to yourself at mile 70. You don't become a whole different person when the race gun goes off. You are the same person that you are during training during the race. And so if you are actually the type of person who at the end of the workout reflects on it and you think, oh, you know what, that's okay, I can do this. Or I'm not having my best day, but I can push through. That's the type of person that you're going to be during the race. So something to practice during training is how you talk to yourself. You can also start by focusing on breath as an anchor. When we talk about anchors in mindfulness, what we're talking about is anything that brings you back to the present moment. So if you're struggling with panic or distress during your workouts, or if you're struggling to focus on the present moment, focusing on the in-breath and the out-breath, or focusing on one foot in front of the other, or one step at a time, those kinds of things can really help. One practice that a lot of people do is naming 3 things that they see. These are all practices that you can do to bring you back to the present moment. And then the last thing that I would say is like a very simple practice that you can do during training to cultivate mindfulness is deliberate exposure. Reminding yourself that deliberate exposure to things is mental practice as much as physical. So when you find yourself pushing yourself to go outside on a day where it's rainy and cold, you think of it as physical practice, right? You're practicing for your race, but it's also mental practice. So preparing yourself for any situation that might come up and seeing it as such. Now, what about pre-race? We're talking about the week of, or even the day before, or even just 5 minutes before your race. The top one being visualization is something that I would suggest to everybody, focusing on visualizing success. It sounds, again, very simple, but actually taking the time to do it when you have to go pick up your bib, you have to pack your drop bags. There's a lot of things you can do to fill your pre-race time, and not enough people take a moment to just sit down, 10 minutes, visualize from the gun going off to the very end of the race, you having a good day. What would it look like? What do you do? What does it feel like? What choices do you make? Those are all things that you can do beforehand that'll help you actually see yourself finishing, actually see yourself moving strong on the back half. Very important practice. Something else that I would suggest pre-race is breathing exercises to retain calm before the race. This could be literally a 10-minute or 5-minute meditation or mindfulness session on YouTube, or just sitting quietly at your Airbnb, wherever you are before the race, in your car even. I've done that before a race. And I suggest this because breathing is proven, intentional breathing practices, quiet time, a moment to ground yourself, are proven to lower cortisol. So you don't want to go into the race with this heightened stress, this heightened, panic, essentially. Your body goes into fight or flight mode when you could take a moment to just breathe and retain the calm there. Something else I like to suggest is taking all the variables off the table before the race. Now, the beautiful thing about ultra running is you kind of never know what you're going to get, and somehow there's always something that you couldn't have planned for. And yes, that is the fun of it. However, if you can take any decisions off your plate during the race, before the race, like what are my A, B, and C foods? Or what is my plan for the first half? What is my plan for the second half? Or how long am I going to spend in each aid station? Or when am I going to change my shoes? Of course, you can change these during the race, but if you can avoid unnecessary decision making when your brain is at its lowest capacity, you can focus instead on being present, on enjoying yourself, on success, on one step at a time, all of that. The next thing I would say is mantra selection. This could be really anything. Honestly, for me, it's whatever song gets stuck in my head and it's just over and over and over again. Just being able to return to something other than the pain, the suffering, whatever's going on with you can be really, really helpful. And last but not least, for pre-race, I like to have my athletes that I work with focus on process goals, not outcome goals. A lot of times pre-race anxiety is attached to you worrying about a specific outcome, whether that's finishing it all, getting under 24 hours or top 10. Athletes being super attached to a very specific outcome that they sometimes have very little control over can cause a lot of pre-race anxiety. And so shifting the focus from that to, I'll be proud of myself if I move strong the entire race, or I'll be proud of myself if I enjoy the entire race, or I'll be proud of myself if I push through something challenging. Those are things you actually do have control over and lower the anxiety going into the race. And I'll just pause here to say that even people who practice these practices regularly struggle with this. It's not something that you arrive at and you're perfect at. It's something that even I, with much experience, still struggle with sometimes. So these are practices for a reason. It's because we have to continually revisit them, and keep working at them. During the race, how can we apply mindfulness and mindset during the race? We can focus on acceptance of discomfort. This is like the key crux of all ultra running, right? Mile 62, I feel awful. I can't keep food down. Everything's awful. Stomach hurts, whatever the case may be. When things aren't going the way you hoped, or when things are not 100%, or when things are not perfect, a lot of times what our brain does is catastrophize. It starts to say, oh, I'm already feeling bad at mile 24. I might as well drop out. Or I've already missed my goal. I might as well drop out. Again, your body is telling you that you are in danger and your brain is saying you should stop. And so one way to sort of pivot from catastrophizing and just telling yourself to quit is to accept that things are not going the way you thought. Attachment is a lot of suffering. This is a Buddhist saying, so attachment is the root of all suffering. So the sooner you can accept that this is your current circumstance, the easier things will be. You can also focus on anchors. Again, anchors being any physical or mental kind of cue that you can return to, whether that's your breath or one foot in front of the other, that kind of thing. Chunking the race is also another one that you can practice. It's not just strategic. It's not just making a plan. It's also helping you mentally to break things up into more manageable pieces. When I ran Western States, I tried to gather as much advice from all of the veterans as I possibly could. And one of my fellow volunteers at the Red Star Ridge aid station, he told me the simplest thing, and it was almost kind of comical. He was like, when you're in the race, just tell yourself that you only have 4 miles till the next aid station. Don't tell yourself you have 74 miles to go. And I was like, okay, yeah, that seems obvious. But then during the race, it actually does make a difference to say, I only have 4 miles to the next aid, get some ice, get some Coca-Cola, whatever, than it is to be at mile 28 and be like, oh my God, I still have like 10 hours to go, or whatever the case might be. So it seems simple, but it's actually really powerful. Another thing that you can do is prepare mental resets. Again, this is mantras and breath, but it's also posture check. So something I like to do is like notice if I'm hunching over or if my pack is kind of making my back sore. Can I make any adjustments? Do I need to pick up my knees more? Simple things like that help bring you back to the present moment rather than really digging into the recesses of how painful things are or how uncomfortable things are. Something that helps a lot of runners, especially in the late stages of the race, is sort of externalizing their attention. So rather than fixating on how challenging things are for you, you can focus instead on your fellow runners, making a new friend, asking them how their day's going. Honestly, my favorite thing in mile 70 to 94 is finding someone chatty. Like I don't have to say a lot, but just letting them kind of talk to me. And something else that really helps me too is volunteers, right? Like having a conversation at an aid station, saying hello, saying thank you. It kind of cheers you up to be friendly to other people too. So that kind of thing really brings you back to why you're here in the first place. Which brings me to the last one, which is gratitude. Gratitude is a mindfulness practice. Like taking a moment to notice what you're grateful for is a mindfulness practice. So thinking through, who am I grateful for? What am I grateful for? I just talked to someone who ran a 2:55 at CIM, and she was talking about how she had someone to think about every single mile. And so when things got hard at mile 16, she thought about her friend, or mile 17, her mom. So these are all maybe what seem like obvious practices and things that maybe other people have done, but they're things that you can put in your toolkit and find what works right for you. A lot of people ignore post-race, right? We either have a good day or we had a bad day, or we finished or we didn't finish. And for me, especially as a coach, I like to think through, what did we learn from this experience? What went well and what didn't go so well? Rarely is a race 100% perfect. Even if we finish and we're like, I'm happy with that finish, there are still moments that we can learn. Like at this mile, I felt really bad, or I could have chosen to do this instead of this, or this is something that I didn't practice as much as I wish I had. And so taking a moment to reflect on how things went, Also to be grateful for the people who helped you out, grateful for the volunteers, grateful for the experience to do something really difficult that a lot of people don't get to do in their day-to-day lives. It's a very special thing to be able to run an ultra and to be with other people who are just as crazy as you, doing the same thing, and to be really grateful for that opportunity. And the last thing too is acceptance, right? Especially if you didn't have as good a day as you had hoped for, taking a moment to be like, you know what, that's okay. I still did a thing that was really challenging, even if it wasn't perfect, as so few things are. A couple takeaways, because again, we don't have all the time in the world for this, but this presentation was really just the surface of what mental endurance entails, why it's important, and how we can use mindful practices to build it. And again, just like physical training, there's always more to learn and always more to practice. And the things that I would say too, if you leave this with nothing else, is to start now and be consistent. Really taking the time to invest in your mental space, in your mental endurance, the same way that you would all of the other pieces that you do to prepare for a 100-mile. Definitely find your why and know your why. This is underrated because I think sometimes people are like, I just signed up because my credit card's already an ultra sign up. I know there's a few of you out there. And then some of you are like, it just seems so exciting. But when you're at mile 80 and you're sitting in a chair and things feel like trash, you need to have a really strong why. So find your why and know your why. Look at every run as an opportunity. Every run is an opportunity, even the easy ones, the short ones, the road runs, the recovery runs. Those are opportunities to practice like mental fortitude, to practice being in the present moment, to practice in breath, out breath, all of that. Focus on curiosity, not judgment. I think the thing that most people overlook with being in the present moment is looking at it without judgment. We could have a whole separate session on how to work on non-judgment, especially ultra runners, I find mentally have a lot of attachment to perfection, which leads to judgment when things are not perfect. So a lot of things to unpack there, but if we shift the focus to curiosity around what our experience is, what we're noticing about ourselves, and what we're learning on the run, we'll be a lot better off. And the last one is to cultivate your inner fan, your inner cheerleader, and your self-advocate. If you believe in yourself, no one can take that away from you. And 100 miles is going to feel like nothing if you believe in yourself. I mean, it'll feel like something, but it won't be nearly as hard as those folks who really struggle to believe in themselves. It's definitely a journey to run 100 miles and a lot easier if you believe in yourself. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. And that's always what I tell my high school athletes as well, just to keep cultivating that inner cheerleader. And that was a lot of me talking. So I'm going to pause for questions. And this is my primary running buddy, Billy, for those of you who have not met him.
Love it. You know, it's interesting, Mallory, it's a couple of things that you talked about really kind of ring true for me. And I wonder, when you are coaching an athlete, how is it that you introduce this into, you're working with an athlete, so you're probably going through all of their training plan and you're going through all the different things that they do. And then how do you drizzle this in? Do you bring this up, like post, do you have them like log their long runs, how they felt?
Mhm.
Or do you brief with them, after races? I mean, one thing that I obviously like, you can have like all kinds of practices in your practice runs, but the way you catastrophize and get down on yourself during a race is completely unlike anything else, a race of any distance. So, what are some things that you do with the people that you coach?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And part of the training that I offer is not just, the typical training plans, personalized, of course, but a lot of mental skills coaching. So a lot of what I do is I ask athletes to think through each run, like, how did you feel? What came up? What challenges did you face? And sometimes athletes, especially when I first start working with them, they kind of they either don't say anything at first or they kind of say, oh, I felt good, but then I kind of push a little further and I'm like, what was the experience like for you? Or how was the weather? Or what challenges came up for you? And part of it is building that rapport with them. But then part of it is also noticing like what they do share. So if someone is like, I was extra tired today, or I noticed that I really struggled to get out of bed, or I had fun. It was easy to run with my friends, things like that. People will give you small tidbits about what makes them tick and also like what makes things a little harder for them. And so there's a lot of inquiry that goes on, a lot of curiosity, asking questions. And then also part of what I offer is sort of reflective prompts each week where they can think through like what came up on the run, seeing every run as an opportunity, some of the things that I talked about during this training, where they can really ask themselves, like, how do I see myself as an athlete? Some runners don't even see themselves as that. So I think it's really just kind of getting to know where they're at with their athletic career and really seeing like what's under the iceberg.
Under the iceberg. Wow. Um, well, this is all really fantastic. We did promise everyone we would keep this at 30 minutes. So I'm going to just kind of go here. Again, this is a great first hit at what a coaching collab should be, a really good quick bite on an important topic. And I want to thank you so much for your bravery in being the first person to do this, Coach Mel. It's really a pleasure having you here and having you be part of the collaborative.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Everyone, you have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.